This process is the murder of innocents and a disgrace to the American government. Who falsely implicated the Rosenbergs, executed for espionage for the USSR? What deal did the prosecutor offer them? Why was a radio presenter nicknamed Lord Haw-Haw hanged in England? More than 70 years after the execution of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, their children, Michael and Robert, are trying to restore the reputation of the American communists. This is not the first time the sons of the couple, accused of espionage, have appealed to U.S. authorities for their parents' posthumous rehabilitation. They have submitted petitions to two presidents, Joe Biden and Barack Obama. However, so far without success. Why did the children appeal to the President of the United States for their parents' rehabilitation? Because they believed that while their father might have been involved in some conspiracy or plot, he did not transmit any information or secret materials that could have compromised the security of the United States of America. As for their mother, they believe she was entirely falsely accused by her own brother, David. Ethel's brother, David Greenglass, worked as a mechanic at the Los Alamos Nuclear Center, New Mexico. He was also convicted of espionage for the USSR. However, for cooperating with the investigation, he received only 10 years in prison. It was Greenglass's testimony that formed the basis of the charges against the Rosenberg couple. In 2001, he confessed that he had in fact falsely implicated his sister and her husband under pressure from the investigation. Many call the trial of the communist couple the most high-profile case in U.S. history. According to the U.S. judicial system, they had transmitted information regarding the Manhattan Project. We all know what the Manhattan Project is. It is the code name for the project to develop nuclear weapons. The prosecutor offered the defendants a deal, confession and revelation of accomplices in exchange for their lives. But the Rosenbergs refused to incriminate themselves even under the threat of death. The couple categorically denied their guilt in transmitting secret Manhattan Project materials to the USSR. In court, they stated, "Our respect for truth, conscience, and human dignity is not for sale. If we are executed, it will be the murder of innocent people and a disgrace to the government of the United States of America." Many celebrities from various countries spoke out in defense of the Rosenbergs. Among them were Charles de Gaulle and Thomas Mann. We know that Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that it was simply a lynch law, not a real court. And Pablo Picasso stated that the conviction of the Rosenberg couple was a crime against humanity. Nevertheless, Eisenhower did not heed the petitions nor the pleas of Ethel Rosenberg herself, who had two young children, Robert and Michael, and the sentence was carried out. Later, Pavel Sudoplatov, former deputy head of NKVD Foreign Intelligence, confirmed the Rosenbergs did indeed cooperate with Soviet intelligence services, but they did not transmit any nuclear secrets. Many experts are confident the couple's trial was more of an ideological act, and the death sentence became a demonstrative reprisal by the U.S. government against communists. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were convicted and sentenced to death within a very short time frame, which is highly unusual for such cases, as matters related to treason and espionage are typically considered for a considerable duration. In this case, the court hearing began on March 6, 1951, and by April 5, the couple had been sentenced to death by electric chair. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg are the only civilians executed in the U.S. for espionage during the Cold War. The statute for this crime appeared in the American Criminal Code in 1917. Unlike treason, espionage can lead to conviction not only for U.S. citizens, but also for foreigners. Moreover, for both crimes, the death penalty is still prescribed. To this day, capital punishment is applied in the United States of America, and it is carried out by hanging, firing squad, gas chamber, electric chair, and lethal injection. England was the first state to introduce accountability for treason. The corresponding law was enacted as early as 1351 and is still in force in the United Kingdom. In 1351, the Treason Act was passed, introducing the concepts of high treason and petty treason. So, petty treason, for example, was when you killed your master. For instance, a servant killed his master, or his master's wife. Or, for example, a wife killed her husband, or a clergyman killed a prelate. In other words, it was an attempt on the life of someone who was hierarchically or socially superior. High treason, on the other hand, encompassed crimes such as conspiring to kill the sovereign, committing adultery with the monarch's wife, his eldest unmarried daughter, or the wife of the heir to the throne, waging war against one's king and aiding his enemies, as well as any attempt to undermine legitimate authority. Thus, in this case, even criticism of a law issued by the king could be considered high treason. Such precedents existed during the Tudor period, for example, Henry VIII. We know he was, shall we say, very amorous. He had many marriages and issued separate decrees regarding his marital relations, and condemnation of these decrees could be punished as high treason. For a long time, the sole punishment for high treason in England was capital punishment. Moreover, the sentence was carried out in extremely cruel and sophisticated ways. In British practice, for men, this involved hanging, drawing, and quartering. For women, it was drawing and burning. Regarding burning for women, the law abolished this type of punishment only in 1790. However, the practice of executing death sentences by hanging continued in Britain until the mid-20th century. The last person executed on charges of high treason was William Brooke Joyce, a Nazi propagandist who hosted English-language broadcasts on German radio during World War II. Lord Haw-Haw, as Joyce was called in his homeland for his exaggerated British accent, was hanged on January 3, 1946 at Wandsworth Prison in London. Currently, in the United Kingdom, high treason is punishable with life imprisonment. The same maximum penalty for this crime is also prescribed in Russia. In Russia, the concept of state treason itself appeared in 1845 in the criminal code approved by Emperor Nicholas I. It encompassed several crimes at once. Firstly, transferring part of the state's territory to another country. Secondly, inciting any foreign power to wage war against Russia. Thirdly, espionage. Essentially, a separate point in the law on state treason covered the actions of diplomats and state officials aimed at serving the interests of other states. Finally, the direct transfer of documents related to state secrets to other states was also specifically highlighted by Nicholas I as a separate point in the law on state treason. During the Soviet era, a new concept was introduced: treason to the motherland. In 1934, this wording appeared in the criminal codes of the Union republics and remained until the collapse of the USSR. Among the populace, the article on treason to the motherland was referred to as Article 58, and those who served time under it were forbidden to settle closer than 100 kilometers from major cities after their release.